Hey friends, it's Lisa. Here's my new logo and blog, so check that out. Today we're going to talk about the Spectrum Noir Sparkle marker techniques. So I got some of these markers and I was like, what can I do with them? Now, this video is a little long, so I cut it down as much as humanly possible to get through all the different techniques that I tried. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this, but you just go and go and go, and you do a ton of different things, and all the things look good individually, but then you put them all together and it looks really bad. But that happened to me this time. So I did too much, and then I'll try to put it together into one card. I really needed to just do one technique on each card. So all my cards look hideous, but I really like these techniques. This one that I'm showing might be one of my favorites, and it was just I heat embossed this background image, and then I wet the watercolor paper, and then added the watercolor on top. So the gold, it turned out really good, and I was able to easily wipe up the paint that kind of sits, or sparkle markers that sit on top of the design. On the white, I wasn't able to as much, and I think the issue there is that the white was super fine lined and the gold had bigger design elements. So that might be something to keep in mind when if you do that technique. Next, I sprayed water over this whole white watercolor paper, and I'm just adding drops of color. This one turned out bad. The issue with this is that there is so much pigment, or I don't think it's pigment. The dye is just so intense that it didn't look great. It's just too much. I went too far or something. But there was a lot of stuff left over. So I tried that technique that you do with distress ink and just picked it up. For some reason, my camera didn't capture that, but that's what this one is. And I loved that. This looked so much better than just dripping the ink on the page. And you don't get as, you aren't losing as much of the dye ink as you are when you're doing that previous technique where you're just dripping drops into the paper. So see, I'm just picking it up from my mat. I tend to hold it down for a little while so that the dye really soaks into the paper. I find that gives me better results than just tapping it down and pulling it up. See, that was the first try I did where I was dropping it directly onto the paper. This looks much better, in my opinion. If you like the more concentrated color, go for that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this with some distress oxides and, kind of mix it up. Get some of the sparkly goodness of the pens and some of that creamy feel of the distress oxides. So I just put everything down and um, just a little bit. You really aren't using too much. And I did a full 8.5 by 11 piece of watercolor paper here. Now I'm using my mister spray bottle to get a fine mist over that. And then I I know a lot of times you just put the paper straight on there, but I wanted to really mix it up a little bit, kind of contaminate both the sparkle markers and the distress oxides. And see here, I'm holding the paper down. You get much more color onto the paper if you do that. Tip. But so I really liked how it looked when I kind of mixed it up, mixed the colors up a little bit with my palette knife. Now I heat it in between, and I went back and dipped it in again. After this, I believed I moved it around, moved the stuff on my mat around with my palette knife, and it gave me kind of streaky look. So if you don't want the streaky look, don't move it around with your palette. I was fine with it, but just so you know. Now here's what everything looks like when it's dry. What the piece I was just working on is in my hand now. I cut them down, obviously. And I took some of these new Desire dies, um, and they're really cool because you kind of can cut out around the edges like I did on this card, and you didn't want to see me just die cutting, so I cut that out. But I die cut it through. I need to get a Gemini because die cutting it through my just hand crank die cutting machine isn't cutting it. My next technique is to take some of this sparkle marker and mix it with some heavy body gel medium, and I really loved this. The issue is I put it on top of that really busy background, and it's a dye, so it was translucent, which looks really good when I do it on white paper, but when I do it on this really textured background, you don't get the impact. If it had been the Distress Oxide that I'd used, I would have gotten a opaque design and you would have seen it more. I still don't think I would have done it just because of how busy the background is. I really needed to just go simple, and of course, I didn't. This took me days. I had so many ideas about what to use this marker for, and I wanted to try all of them. And for some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to try them all on the same set of cards. It didn't work. So, learn from my mistake. Just go with one or two techniques and get what you want. See here, it looks opaque because the gel is not dry yet. When it dries, it won't be opaque. So, I think it looked fine when it was opaque. It didn't look as great when it wasn't. Next, I'm trying on the white paper, which does look really good. And when it does dry, you get a little bit of sparkle, but not overly much. That's something I liked about these markers is that they're not overly like glitter in your face. It's more of a shimmer and shine, which is a kid's show, and I know that because I have a niece. And we watch it sometimes. Not as much as My Little Pony, though. I know everything there is to know about My Little Pony because we've watched every episode a gazillion times. Nobody cares. Anyway, I'll keep going. So, as I pull this back, it looks really good. And I'll have a link to everything or comparable materials that I've used bel- um, in my blog. So go ahead, and my blog is terrylisacreates.com, and you'll see this blog post. Otherwise, you can just click below and go over there. So I really love this stencil and the little dots. A lot of stencils I love. I really like stencils. That's something I've collected more of since I've been rebuilding my craft room. I really find that I use a lot of stencils and I use this technique a lot. This galaxy on top of this kind of background I created also looked really amazing, and I ruined it. So, not there, but in the card. I just had trouble, guys. I'm sure you've had that where some days it's just not working. This is like 4 hours of footage that I've sped way up and I cut way down to get it to this 30 minutes and still. So, anyway, um, I would suggest doing this technique on white if you're using the sparkle markers just to get the hit of color instead of doing it on a busy background like this. Next, I'm trying some wing techniques because I knew I was going to make love bugs. And I was like, oh, that'll be so cute, these are going to be Valentine's Day cards. So I end up with 4 cards I'm giving to some family members, and then my niece liked a lot of the other ones, so she's giving them to her friends who she may or may not have 2 husbands. She's so cute. She goes to daycare, and she was telling us all about how Miles and Dylan were both her husbands. And it was okay that she had 2 husbands because, she's little and little people can have 2 husbands. I asked her why I wasn't invited to the wedding, and she goes, "Little people don't have weddings, Aunt Lisa." It was adorable. Anyway, so continuing on, I keep doing this and add some more wings to the cards, which I really like the wings and I really like the pink texture. I guess it's not texture paste, it's a heavy gloss that I'm using. I really liked how it turned out, other than that it's on such dark cardstock already. I should have gone around the edges with the dark blue and kind of watercolored it out so that the design stood out more. But I spent so much time on these cards already and it just wasn't worth it. So, one thing I did want to show you is off camera, I used these new Sheena Douglas 3D stencils and tried to do the shimmer markers through the stencils. And as you can see, they turned out pretty good, but I had some like leakage issues, and that brown modelly part is from trying to use a baby wipe because I was having trouble with the smallest stencil. And I love the stencils, and I like the sparkle markers. They just aren't super compatible. So just something to keep in mind. I think if you used them on the base layer and then did the top layers and something else, you'd be fine. But getting those real detailed layers, not working. So my next technique is watercoloring with the markers. I decided that I really liked the Distress Oxides with the sparkle markers earlier, so why wouldn't they be perfect together to watercolor together? And that didn't work out very well. When you put them together, it's kind of, you get the effect where the dye in the marker creates really harsh lines, and the Distress Oxide doesn't work that way. So you get really harsh lines against these really soft areas. And I just wouldn't suggest watercoloring with them together. That's why I use the Distress Oxides and the Distress Inks, or like I did earlier, which I loved, was the Distress Oxides with the markers when you're doing that smooshing technique. Um, but when you're wanting to get a nice watercolored picture, I would stick with only dye mediums to watercolor with, or only Distress Oxide pigmented materials to work with. So what that means is if you have a watercolor in a tube or in a palette and it's dry and hard, that's going to be a pigmented material. Traditional watercolors, so like Daniel Smith, and I have a new one coming out of some watercolors my sister has been trying out um, here in a week or two. Those are ground up rocks, ground up minerals, and then they're bound with, it depends on the quality, but the Daniel Smith and the ones I'll be showing soon are both bound with honey, so it makes them creamy. The Distress Oxides also have pigments in them, and a dye-based ink like the markers and the original Distress inks, any liquid watercolor, those are all dye-based, and they just they don't work the same as the pigments. The pigments are going to float on top and they don't really sink into the paper. The dye-based ink sinks in and kind of locks the color into the fibers of the paper. So I had doodled these love bugs out on my iPad and transferred them into the Cricut software, created them into draw images, drew them with this Sharpie marker, and um, then I watercolored them like we looked at a minute ago. And so I have video for all of that, but it they didn't turn out very well. I do a step here in a minute that just ruins them, of course. And so I didn't think that you wanted to see all that with this video being so long, but I'll do that again sometime and video it all again for you. But I felt like since the watercolor wasn't real smooth and kind of exactly what I wanted it, I'd add another layer. And that's something I've kind of learned from mixed media, which I'm sorry because earlier, for some reason, I was calling it multimedia, and I don't know. It was just stuck in my head, and I was like, this sounds wrong, but I can't think of what the right way to do it is. So, anyway, one thing I've learned from mixed media and doing mixed media art is that if it doesn't look good, add another layer. Just don't scrap it just because it doesn't turn out perfect. I thought they looked good, but not perfect. So here I am. I just took some of this gel pens, this glitter gel pens, and some of my stencils again because I love stencils, and kind of outlined them. I gave the girl love bugs pink. Uh, the girl love bugs are pink and they have polka dots, and the boys have geometric lines and they're blue. So here I'm looking at some of my different backgrounds and seeing which love bugs goes on them. At this point, I thought, oh, the love bugs are so blah. I need to jazz them up a little bit. I wish I hadn't have done that. Cuz you'll see in a minute what I do, but they went from being super cute to kind of like meh, you know? So, they would have looked really cute with those wings, so it kind of looks like they're flying. And um but I like to do this kind of test out what I'm doing. So here I thought it'd be really cute to have the two little love bugs flying through space. And so here is where I make my mistake. I add the first layer of the heavy gloss gel over the top because I wanted them to be kind of glossy like a real bug is, and they just didn't turn out very well. I don't know, maybe if I'd used clear embossing it would have been better, but the heavy gloss gel kind of moved the pigment or the ink around a little bit and got rid of all the hard work with the stencils, and so it just didn't work out very well. But I wanted to have my sentiments on a light wash of blue and pink because I thought that would match with my cards and look good. So here I'm doing kind of the same technique I did earlier, except for instead of dropping big drops of the dye onto the paper, I'm picking up the ink from my craft mat and adding it then onto the paper. So I'm getting a much lighter feel, and I'm able to do kind of a wash. So it turned out pretty good. I took my towel and smudged up some of the darker areas. But I was having a curling issue when I was adding so much water. it really makes the paper curl, and I don't have a whole bunch of masking tape, so I just went ahead and stuck some tape to the back and held it to my mat. But I decided I needed some embellishments, so I have these flourish dies from Anna Griffin, and they're amazing. I really like them. I think I would have done some of the desire dies from Crafter's Companion to kind of match the backgrounds I'd already done with them, but I didn't have my die cutting machine is just such a pain to do those really intricate dies. I didn't want to fuss with it, so I did the larger dies that Anna Griffin has. So I know earlier I said I didn't like when I dropped it straight into the paper, and that's true. But at the same time, I do like this because I just used one color. So I'm really just getting a full sheet of that color. Next, I wanted to try creating kind of an ombre background. So I did this in two ways. I went with just some watercolor paper and the markers and tried to kind of blend them between. I think you need some water to actually blend between the colors, and I didn't use that on this card. Just, or, well, I do spray it, but it doesn't do too much. I think if you wanted a really good blend, you would draw it on the mat and then kind of use a blending tool and some, oh, is it called Gamsol? No, that's colored pencil. I cannot think of the word right now. I'm sorry. But mineral spirits? No, I'm sorry. I'm blanking on the word. But you use that and you just kind of blend it on. I'll look it up and do a video on it soon. But um, Sarah Davies does the technique a lot. It's some inexpensive product and it just helps you blend out water mediums. Anyway, I'm going off topic. But so this one I still like. It doesn't blend as smoothly um, as some other techniques, and that's fine as long as you know that and that's what you're going for. So this wasn't my favorite panel that I created, but more because the colors than anything. I think it'd be a nice background on like a field or um, some kind of card if you're doing that. So if you're doing like a faraway look of, that looks kind of like a marshy field, which is pretty. But if you use some of the different colors, you might get a different look. So here I am. I'm doing the same technique except for with the more summer colors. So the pack I bought was from HSN and it came with the more earthy colors and it also came with these more sunset vibrant colors. So I did the just straight from the pen onto the paper ombre look with the last card. And this card I'm doing the same thing except for I'm mixing a little bit of the gloss gel with each of the inks because I wanted to see if I could get a similar look to something I'd done in my last video. So check that out if you want to see more. I I wasn't able to get the same look that I did, but I do like the look that I got here. I think if you just I think if you just take a little bit and kind of spread it out or did it in the middle or kind of did like I did here, it adds a really nice effect where if you just left the card as you're seeing it right now, you could add some stuff on top of it and really make a cool card. So what I get in the end is nice as well. I think it'd look really cool if I die cut it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. It hasn't been made into a card or anything. But if you're going to do this technique, remember just get just a little bit of the heavy gloss gel and just a few drops of the marker is going to be perfect for you. Sarah Davies said that she hasn't had to replace any of her markers because they last for so long, which they do seem to last for a long time. So that's nice. And um, I think it really depends on what technique you're going to do. If you're going to make a bunch of pages like I did, where I did the full blue one color background, I'm not sure it's going to last forever, but that's okay because you make a really cool paper. So here I'm adding the next color, and you're able to kind of mix them together. You can see I mixed one color at a time because the gloss gel does dry pretty quickly. So that blue on the top is, by this point, is actually pretty dry. So if you mixed all the colors first and then started adding them, you're going to have some issues. So I went ahead and just did it color by color, and that's just something you kind of need to think about. As it dries, it looks a lot better than it does right here. Just so you know, I get that it looks not super great there, but it does look a lot better after having dried. So, and you do, since it's a dye ink and you get a translucent color, you do get a really luminous color as well, since it's on the white cardstock. And I didn't mix them, color between color very well, but I did try and overlap them. So anyway, I did not have the video of me creating each individual card because they don't look super great. um, and I just didn't want to bore you with that since I didn't have anything super special. I cut out the sentiments with my Cricut maker and I made them way too big. It was just a hot mess. I don't even know if you can call it a hot mess because it didn't look great. None of this background turned out really good, and all the individual pieces looked really good. Just me putting them all together was a fail. So, if you have a favorite technique to do with the sparkle markers, let me know. And especially if that technique I didn't cover here. What how do you use these markers? Because I'm really trying to figure out how I like to use them. I think this card here was my favorite. Um, and that's it. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Thanks.